Yeah. Blackjack. Life is like a game of cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Yeah. To play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother. Yo, what up? It's your boy StraightGameTV. I come to you today to bring you some more powerful information in regards to 2Pac and his mom, Afeni Shakur. Like I said once again, and first and foremost, I'd like to start this off by saying that I've never met David Kenner. From what I understand, he's a prominent, successful criminal defense attorney who's represented Suge Knight. At one time, he was part owner of Death Row, and he also represented Death Row as an attorney. So what I want to talk about today is during the case that Afeni Shakur filed against Suge Knight and also David Kenner, there was a claim of relief in that case in which they wanted to against Mr. Kenner himself for legal malpractice and breach of fiduciary duty. And I find it to be interesting. If you want to know something about a lawyer, usually another lawyer will let you know about what that lawyer represents, or you'll find out in the case. And in this case in particular, it's very interesting because, as you can see, David Kenner was the spearhead for the getting 2Pac out of prison, being the representative or attorney on that case, involving that case. And this is powerful because, you know, if you really don't know anything about that, because a lot of people don't, they think they do, but they don't. But today I'm going to reveal to you unknown facts as I follow this case. And it starts off like this. It says, plaintiffs repeat each and every allegation set forth in paragraph 1 through 73 of this complaint with the same force and effect as if fully restated in the claims for relief. And then it goes on to say, because David Kenner was and is an officer, shareholder, and principal of Death Row, as well as the attorney for Death Row and Suge Knight, he was morally, ethically, and legally barred from either providing legal representation to 2Pac or in holding himself out as being 2Pac's attorney. Basically, they're saying that David Kenner should have known better than to attempt to represent all three, or should I say one entity in Death Row and 2Pac and Suge Knight under the same umbrella. And then it goes on to say, because David Kenner's purported representation of 2Pac was in hopeless conflict with David Kenner's own personal financial interests and his professional obligations to Death Row and Suge Knight, such conflict could not be waived by 2Pac when he entered into the Dannemora agreement. And then it goes on to say, which is very interesting, by holding himself out as 2Pac's attorney in connection with the Dannemora agreement, David Kenner sought to create an aura of legitimacy to a sham and unethical transaction. Basically, they're saying that Mr. Kenner knew what he was doing, and he knew that it wasn't right, but he did it anyway. And then it goes on to say, by purporting to represent 2Pac in connection with the making of the Dannemora agreement, while actually representing himself, Knight, and Death Row, David Kenner took advantage of 2Pac's incarceration by depriving 2Pac of the independent legal advice to which he was entitled to prior to entering that agreement. That's a fact. Can't argue with that. And then it goes on to say, thereafter, while purporting to represent 2Pac, David Kenner actually continued to represent his own interests and those of Death Row, to the detriment of 2Pac and his interests. As we see, that would also be a fact under the circumstances as we read the agreement that 2Pac signed. And then it goes on to say, subsequent to September 16th, 1995, David Kenner failed to and refused to perform his duties as 2Pac's attorney because to have done so would have had been contrary to Suge Knight's interests David Kenner's own personal interests, and the interests of Death Row. Wow. Amazing. Once again, you can't argue that fact. When you look at the agreement and you read what they were filing in this case, that's true. And then it goes on to say, accordingly, while the Dana Moore agreement obligated Death Row to prepare a formal written recording agreement between Tupac and Death Row, David Kenner never prepared such an agreement, although Tupac repeatedly demanded that he do so. I wonder why. I mean, you go from September 16th, 1995, to when Tupac died on September 13th. Wow, amazing. Then it goes on to say, by reason of Kenner's failure to prepare a formal written recording agreement, plaintiffs have been damaged by being deprived of the opportunity to invoke those clauses which an attorney truly representing the independent interests of Tupac would have insisted upon. So basically they're saying if Tupac had an independent lawyer who would normally have written up an agreement, or if David Kenner would have written up the agreement like he was supposed to, when Tupac died, they would have a formal recording contract to go by in any case to understand what his rights were and the things that they could fight, say something happened like right now with this legal case. And they didn't have that because the contract that he signed was only like 4 pages. So, and then it goes on to say, additionally, many areas which would have been the subject of negotiation and clarified in a written agreement have now resulted in claims against the estate. Basically, they're saying that things that it should have been covered in an agreement that David Kenner is supposed to have written up, or an independent lawyer would have written up, people are now suing the estate for. And then it goes on to say, for example, Suge Knight has filed a claim against the estate asserting that he is entitled to receive 20% of the sums due to Tupac as his manager, even though there is no provision for compensation in either of the agreements that Tupac signed. In making his claim, which would involve Knight receiving compensation and a fee for payments made by Suge Knight's own record company to Tupac, Knight relies on custom and usage in the business. And then it goes on to say, Suge Knight's right to receive a fee would have been something which would have been resolved in the written agreement, if any, between Suge Knight and Tupac. And then it goes on to say, if David Kenner had been protecting Tupac's independent interests, he would have pursued those final agreements, which would have dealt with these issues in the documents and would have made it clear that Suge Knight was not entitled to independent compensation as a manager. And then it goes on to say, but for David Kenner's failure to properly exercise his professional responsibility to Tupac, Tupac and the estate would not now be subject to such claims by Death Row and Suge Knight. Then it goes on to say, furthermore, prior to discharging David Kenner as his attorney, Tupac directed him to prepare merchandising contracts for his fan club and for others. And then it goes on to say, in spite of Tupac's directions to David Kenner that he prepare merchandising agreements, David Kenner took no steps to comply with that directive. And then it goes on to say, instead, upon information and belief, Death Row, unbeknown to Tupac, entered into an illegal merchandising agreement with a company named Globex, in which items such as t-shirts and other wearing apparel bearing Tupac's name and likeness was sold without Tupac's consent and without paying him any royalties or commissions, but from which Death Row profited financially. And then it goes on to say, in addition, during 1996, Tupac was afforded the opportunity to compose the musical score to a motion picture entitled Gang Related, in which Tupac was also acting. While a contract for Tupac's acting was prepared, that document expressly provided for a written contract to be prepared which would govern the rights of the parties as it related to the soundtrack album. And then it goes on to say, Upon being given the opportunity to compose the foregoing musical score, 2Pac directed David Kenner to prepare the necessary contract documents. And then it goes on to say, because David Kenner never prepared those documents, 2Pac lost the opportunity to compose the musical score for Gang Related, as well as the income he would have earned for such musical score. And then it goes on to say, by reason of the foregoing acts of omission and commission on the part of David Kenner, plaintiffs have been damaged in the sum of $20 million. I just wanted to bring this to you because a lot of people, like I said, have been running rumors as it relates to 2Pac, him being on death row, what actually happened. And like I said, when you get these legal documents and what 2Pac's mom was fighting for, and you look at the contract that he signed with Death Row, and then you understand the legal ramifications and the ethics involved with the situation, you understand that it was way crazy, and a lot of what we would consider today, it would be totally unethical, illegal, and 2Pac basically signed a contract that basically they never honored. It was never honored because 2Pac's mom had to file this lawsuit, as well as Death Row filed for bankruptcy. So she didn't get what she was supposed to get. They filed for bankruptcy, and in the bankruptcy, she made a claim, and she got paid money, as you can see right here. So like I said, I just wanted to bring this to y'all. You know what I mean? Rest in peace, Afeni Shakur, 2Pac Shakur, and like I said, Straight Game TV. Click like, click share, you know, and I'm still going to come back with more powerful information and exclusives that people have never really covered before involving the actual factual situation involving 2Pac Shakur. Straight Game.